Right now, you are the only kind of human on Earth. Just one. That feels normal. It is actually one of the strangest facts about our species, and until very recently, it was never true. In May of 2026, a team digging in Ethiopia pulled a set of bones out of the ground that nobody could place. Not a new variant of us, not a disputed skull, a genuinely separate branch of the human family. One that walked the same valley as our earliest ancestors more than 2.5 million years ago, breathed the same air, lived its whole life out there, and then vanished, leaving almost nothing behind. And that discovery comes with a quiet, unsettling question. If an entire branch was hiding in the ground this whole time, how many more are we still missing? The planet was once crowded with versions of what we would call human. Today, there is one. Us. So what happened to all the others? And why are we the branch still standing? Go back to roughly 300,000 years ago. On that planet, at that moment, Homo sapiens exists. But so does something else. Several something elses. In Europe and Western Asia, there are Neanderthals. Stocky, strong, built for cold. Genetically 99.7% identical to us. In a cave system in Siberia, there is a population we now call the Denisovans, known at the time to no one, least of all themselves. On a small Indonesian island called Flores, there are tiny humans barely a meter tall, hunting pygmy elephants in a world that sounds more like a folk tale than a fossil record. And scattered across southern Africa, there is Homo naledi, a species with a brain about 1/3 the size of ours that, somehow, still seemed to be burying its dead on purpose. That is at least 5 different kinds of human, alive at the same time, possibly more. The Ethiopia discovery is a reminder to be humble about the number. Now, here is the first thing worth knowing about Neanderthals. Because almost everything most people believe about them is wrong. They were not primitive. They were not slow. They were not the comedy caveman from old drawings. Neanderthals survived in Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. An unbroken run of generations through conditions that would end most modern societies in a single season. They made tools precise enough to butcher large animals. They used fire. They cared for injured members of the group. There is strong evidence they buried their dead, and not just to be rid of the body. At some sites, the arrangement suggests intention, something closer to grief. In 2026, researchers working with ancient DNA from a site in Poland mapped the family connections inside a single Neanderthal community. A father, his daughters, an aunt, cousins. A social group bound together the same way ours are, by kinship, by closeness, by people who know each other and depend on each other to stay alive. These were not animals stumbling through prehistory. They were families, and they are gone. Completely. Their last traces disappear from the fossil record around 40,000 years ago, which is roughly when Homo sapiens was moving into the same territory in real numbers. Whether that timing is a coincidence, nobody has answered cleanly. Then there are the Denisovans, and the Denisovans are something else entirely. For Neanderthals, we have thousands of fossils, skulls, femurs, finger bones, ribs. We can reconstruct how they looked, how they moved, how they spread across the land. For the Denisovans, after decades of searching, the entire physical record is this: a finger bone, a fragment of jaw, and 3 teeth. That is it. That is everything we have of a human species that may have ranged across a huge stretch of Asia, from Siberia down to the Tibetan Plateau, possibly all the way into Southeast Asia. We only learned they existed at all in 2010, not from a skull in the ground, from DNA pulled out of that single finger bone in a Siberian cave. The result came back as something nobody expected. This was not a Neanderthal. It was not a modern human. It was a third thing. An entire branch of the human family that no one had named, because no one knew to look. If that unsettles you, here is the part that makes it stranger. The Denisovans are gone as a living species, but they are not entirely gone. Their DNA survived. Some Pacific Islander populations today carry between 4 and 6% Denisovan ancestry, which means, at some point, Homo sapiens and Denisovans met, lived close together, and had children. Children whose descendants are living people on islands in the Pacific right now. Tibetans carry a gene that helps the body work in thin, high-altitude air. That gene is Denisovan in origin. A population that disappeared tens of thousands of years ago may still be helping people breathe on a mountain today. We have no idea what the Denisovans looked like. We have never found a complete skull, a genome, a few teeth, and a genetic echo scattered through living people. That is the entire footprint of a species that was once real people in a real world. This channel is about exactly this kind of thing, the discoveries that make the world feel bigger and stranger than it looked a minute ago. If that is your kind of curiosity, subscribing means you will not miss what comes next. Now, on the island of Flores in Indonesia, there is a cave called Liang Bua. And in that cave, in 2003, researchers found something they did not know how to classify. The bones belonged to a human about a meter tall, with a brain roughly the size of a large orange, so small that when the find was announced, some scientists insisted it had to be a diseased modern human, someone with a developmental condition, because the alternative seemed too strange to be real. The alternative turned out to be correct. This was a separate human species, Homo floresiensis. Sometimes called the Hobbits, not really with affection, more as an admission that the scale of it is genuinely hard to process. These were fully formed humans, small enough that the average 8-year-old today would look down at them. They made stone tools. They hunted pygmy elephants, small elephants that had also shrunk over generations through a process called island dwarfism. When a population is isolated, with limited food and no large predators, evolution pushes it towards smaller size. The elephants shrank. The humans shrank. The Komodo dragons, for reasons that still make biologists uncomfortable, got bigger. Homo floresiensis survived until around 50,000 years ago. Their tools in that cave go up to about that point. Then, nothing. Homo sapiens was moving through that part of the world around the same time. Maybe that mattered. Maybe it did not. We do not know. But here is where it gets strange in a different way. The Ethiopia discovery in 2026 was not about a species 50,000 years old. It was about a species from 2.5 million years ago. From the very earliest moment the genus Homo was beginning to take shape, and even that far back, there were already multiple overlapping lineages. Our ancestors, and at least one other previously unknown species, sharing the same valley, the same food, the same water. Two branches of what would become the human family living side by side. Which means this was never an accident of recent history. Multiple kinds of human living at once was not some unusual episode 40,000 years ago. It was the normal state of things for millions of years. The strange part, the genuinely weird, statistically unlikely outcome, is now. One species, alone. So how did we get here? Why us? The honest answer is, We do not fully know. The tempting answer is that we were smarter. But Neanderthals solved complex problems. Denisovans adapted to high-altitude environments that challenge modern humans even with all our technology. Homo floresiensis survived on an island full of giant reptiles for what may have been hundreds of thousands of years. Intelligence is not the clean dividing line it feels like. What the evidence does point to is harder to name. Homo sapiens seem to have been unusually good at keeping large social networks alive. Not just the immediate family, not just the small hunting band. Connections across distance. Groups that could trade tools, share information, pass knowledge across geography. If one band hit a bad season, they could reach another. If a new technique worked, it spread fast. Farther across a wider web of people who were all loosely in contact. Other human species may have had culture, but ours may have traveled. Ideas, tools, skills stored across a larger, shared mind than any single group could hold alone. When the climate shifted, and it shifted often and hard, a species with that kind of distributed resilience could absorb the shock. Isolated populations could not. But climate and connection do not explain everything. Luck mattered. Geography mattered. The size of a population at exactly the wrong moment mattered. The Neanderthal community reconstructed from that Polish DNA was a small one. Small populations can vanish from a single bad winter. From a disease that moves faster than the group can adapt. From a birth rate that drops just below replacement, for just long enough that recovery becomes impossible. The other human species were not stepping stones to us. They were not early drafts. They were complete solutions to the problem of surviving this planet. Solutions that worked for a long time in the places they were built for. Then a combination of things, none of them simple, closed in around them. We are what is left. Not the strongest version, not the oldest. The last branch of a tree that used to reach in directions we are still discovering. That Ethiopia fossil is a reminder that we have not found all the branches yet. There may be species still in the ground we have never pulled out. Lineages hiding in the DNA of living people that we have not yet named. The map of what human once meant is almost certainly bigger than anything we can currently draw. Which human species do you find most fascinating, and why? Leave it in the comments. I read every one. And if you want more of this, the questions that look simple until you pull the thread, subscribing is the easiest way to make sure you see what comes next. And if you want more of this, the questions that look simple until you pull the thread, subscribing is the easiest way to make sure you see what comes next.